everyone, and welcome back to this week's Mindfulness Moment. This week's topic is awareness of the world around us. So we're going to be doing two activities. The first one is the reason I am outside today. It's going to help us learn the different ways we can be aware of the world around us. And then we're going to be doing a craft that's going to let us practice the skills we have learned. So before we get started, what I'd like us to do is do a quick breathing circle just so we can get into the mindfulness or the mood for mindfulness. So before we get started, I just want to talk about why awareness of the world around us is important when it comes to mindfulness. So in my first video, I talked about why mindfulness is important and what it does for us when we are good at being mindful. And a big part of that is being present and in the moment. And the good way of being present is to be aware of what is going on around us. So the way we do that is by using our five senses, which are sight, smell, taste, touch, and then hearing, which then leads into my next activity. So for this activity, what I need us all to do is be aware of what our five senses are perceiving. Not necessarily taste, because when you're doing mindful activities, you're not necessarily going to have something to taste with you, but just being aware of our five senses. So what I want you to do is find a spot. It could be outside like me. It could be inside, just wherever you're comfortable, and I just want you to sit down in a relaxed and comfortable position, and then we'll start our activity. So once you're in a comfortable position, what we're going to do is one by one we're going to go through the five senses, other than taste, so I guess four senses technically. What I want you to do is really focus on what you are sensing and what you're perceiving. So to start out, we're going to look for five things we can see, and I want you to really describe them. You can either say it out loud or just say it in your head. But for example, I can see the construction equipment in the yard behind ours. And then I can go on to, and I can describe its color. So it is yellow with black, and they've got little red stripes on it. It's covered in dirt because there isn't grass back there right now. And then I want you to do that, but with four other things too. So I can also see my neighbor's fence that goes around his pool. I can also see the trampoline in my neighbor's backyard. I can see the chairs in our backyard, and I can see a for sale sign in front of the house behind ours. So for each one of those things, what I would like you to do is to really describe it. So the different colors, the way the textures look, anything you can think of to describe it, to really stay in the moment and focus on what you are seeing. So what we're going to do next is 4 things we can hear. And again, I want you to go into as much detail as you can when you're thinking about these 4 things. And you can either say it out loud or again say it in your head. After you do the 4 things you can hear, I'd like you to do 3 things you can feel. And again, as much detail as you can. I want you to really focus on what you feel and how it feels. So like the grass underneath me is kind of prickly feeling. After you do the 4 things you can, or the 3 things you can feel, I'd like you to do 2 things you can smell and trying to describe the smell in the best way that you can. I know it's tough, but the point of it is to really stop and think about what our senses are feeling and perceiving so that we can stay in the moment. So what I'd like you to do now is to pause the video so you can practice that activity. And I want you to really focus on what it is that your senses are feeling and perceiving and sensing. So remember, it's 5 things we can see, 4 things we can hear, 3 things we can feel, and 2 things we can smell. Make sure when we are doing this, we are really focusing on the details of it and either saying them to ourselves in our head or saying them out loud to others. After you're all done that, what we're going to do is I have a craft for us to do. And while we are doing it, we're just going to be focusing on the craft and our 5 senses while we are doing it. So now's a good time to pause the video and come back in a minute when you're done the activity. And I will be inside. All right, so I hope that activity went well for everyone. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a sort of a weaving, cardboard weaving craft. So while we're doing this, please remember the activity we did earlier. And while we get into the weaving, just remember our 5 senses and really focus on what they are perceiving while we do it. So what we're going to need is we're going to need a big cardboard piece, sort of like this one. If you're bad at drawing circles like me, you're going to need like a bowl or something round that we can trace. You're going to need a marker or a pen or a pencil or something you can use to trace. We're going to need like a straight object of some kind that we can use to make straight lines. So a ruler would work good. However, I don't have any rulers here for some reason, but we've got about 4 crib boards, so I'm just going to use the edge of this to do a line. You're going to need scissors. If you need help with the scissors, make sure we're asking someone a little older and maybe a bit more comfortable than we are if we need that help. We're going to need tape again, and we are going to need yarn. So I've got 3 different kinds of yarn right here. They can be different sizes, thicknesses, colors, whatever you want. But yes, so that's what you're going to need. All right, so the first thing you want to do is trace a circle onto your cardboard. So I did mine earlier. And then once you've got it traced, what you're going to do is you're going to want to cut it out with your scissors. Then once you are done that, you're going to take your straight edge. Hopefully that is a ruler for everyone else, but for me, I will be using my gritboard. And you're just going to make lines from one end to the other. So at the end of that, you should have something that looks sort of like this. You want to make sure there's an even amount of lines in this circle. If you want to do more, if you want to do less, that's totally cool. Also, if you want to take a ruler and measure out each one of your sections so that they're a bit more even, that works too. But if, like me, and you don't have a ruler, it's totally fine if it's a little uneven like this one. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to put our straight edge and our mark to the side, and then we're going to take our scissors and we are just going to cut a small little cut at the top of each one of our lines. So not super deep, just sort of like this one here. If you guys can see that, so it isn't too deep. And then you're going to do that for each one of the lines on your circle. So after we finish cutting each one of the tops of our circle, it should look something sort of like this, so that you can see each individual cut. You're going to take some yarn. So I'm leaving my yarn in this bowl, but just making sure that I can get enough to do this part of the weaving. And you're going to take the end of your yarn and just put it through one of the spokes. So I've chosen to put it on the side with my lines on it, so that once I'm doing the weaving, I can't see these lines. And then you're just going to tape it down. Once it's taped down, you're going to take your yarn and you're going to put it in the spoke that is directly across from it, so that this line lines up with the middle of your circle as much as you possibly can make it. Then you're going to take this yarn and you're going to flip to the side with the lines on it, and you're just going to put it in the spoke right next to it. So it should look something like that. After you've done that, you're going to flip back to the other side and you're going to go across the line you already have to the one next to it, making it an X, sort of like this. And then you're going to take that one, and instead of going to the spoke that's already got yarn through it, you're going to go to the one next to it. So you're always going to go to the right spoke of where you are. And then you're going to repeat the whole thing, the same thing for the rest of your circle. So once you're at the very end, the last place you can go is right here where there's already a piece of yarn. So you're just going to do that. And then you're going to bring the yarn across one more time back to the spoke that we started on. And you're going to pull it through. And then you're just going to tape it down here again. And you should end in the same spot that we began. So I'm just going to take tape it down. And then I'm going to take my scissors and just cut off the rest of the yarn. So once you're done, it should look something sort of like this. If you measured it out a bit better than mine, then your circle might look a bit more even, but I think it's fine the way it is. All right, so now that we're done that, we're going to take another bundle of yarn and you're going to just cut off. So I've already done it. You're just going to cut off a decently long piece. If at some point during this you'd like to switch up the colors or the type of yarn, I'll show you how to do that. But for now, you're just going to take your yarn and you're going to tie it to one of the lines in your wheel. So it should just be tied onto one, just like that. So this is the part where we get to practice our mindfulness, because the next little bit is pretty repetitive. So as you're doing this next part, just be aware of your senses, of how the yarn feels in your hands as you move it, any smells around you. Like I can smell one of the candles we've got burning in the kitchen, and just how things look as you're doing it. Just pay attention to that and try and stay in the moment. So what you're going to do is, once you have it on that, you're going to go under the line of string next to it. You're going to pull the yarn all the way through. And then you're going to go over the one next to that. And then under the one next to that. Oh, that wasn't a piece of yarn. You're going to go under this one. And you're going to pull it so that it's nice and tight into the center. And then you're going to go over. And then you're going to go under again. So I'm going to do this for a bit just to show you what this will look like, and we'll come back in a second, just so you can see what it looks like once you've got a bit more progress. So here to give you some idea of what it should look like is what I have done so far. Make sure as we're going along, you're not pulling too hard, because that'll make the yarn go under it and you won't get sort of the cool looking layer like I do, where it's going from like dark to light. And if you want to add different string to it, all you're gonna do is you're gonna get another piece of whatever color you want. So I've got my sort of greeny, yellowy stuff. And then you're just gonna cut off another piece, and you're just gonna tie it to the end of the string you've already been working with. Pretty simple. Just remember as you're doing it that if you've taken this line of yarn and gone over one of these strings, that you're going to go under the next one. So you just want to remember over, under, over, under, over, under while you're doing it. And if you can, stay present and in the moment. This is a good way to practice that. So you just tie it up, and then you can keep going with your over unders. Don't pull too tight. Yep, again, just don't as we go through. If you pull too tight, it's going to go under the yarn, and it's going to take a lot longer for you to finish. But yeah, that is how you do the weaving. I will show you mine when I finish it. So here's what mine looks like now that I am mostly done. I could probably go a little bit further on the outside if I wanted, but I also think this is fine too. And whenever you're done, you're done. Once you finish, you're just going to take your last little bit of string and move it through one of the cuts at the top of your circle, and then you're just going to tape it to the back like you did with the first piece of string. There you go. There is our weaving craft. That is a good thing to do when we want to practice just being in the moment. Other things like coloring or listening to music or any activity you enjoy that you can do and just focus on for half an hour, 15 minutes, however long it takes you. And then just focusing on that activity using our 5 senses activity that we did earlier. That's a great way to practice mindfulness. So I hope everyone enjoyed doing our mindfulness activity and our mindfulness craft for this week. The 5 senses activity, where we take a moment and look for 5 things we can see, 4 things we can hear, 3 things we can touch, 2 things we can smell, and if you can, 1 thing you can taste, is really good to use in moments where we're stressed or anxious, because it grounds us and brings us into the present moment, and will also allow us to use the breathing exercises that we did last week. And it is always good to have an activity to do that brings you mindfulness and grounding, like the circle weaving. So I hope you enjoyed this week. I hope you watch the next one. Thanks for watching.